Power Hour with John Lee.
So, the Shah of Iran, what's the basic story with the Shah of Iran? We just took a date because obviously Iran, was known as Persia, it's ancient. But if you go back to 1953, in 1953, Iran was quite a progressive country. And they had a democracy, and they had a prime minister that was elected democratically, a man called Mohammad Mossadegh. And the first thing he did when he came to power was expel the British Petroleum in particular, BP. And he kicked them out. And there were a lot of people there, a lot of British people living there, working there obviously at BP. That was their life. They lived and worked in Iran, and they all got kicked out, and they nationalised the oil, right? So they said, right, it's our oil. If you want it, you can come and pay for it. But other than that, you get out. You're not monopolising our natural resources anymore. So that made him extremely popular with the Iranians, which it would, I think, with the population of any country. And then the CIA decided that was unacceptable. Who were the Iranians to decide what to do with Iranian oil? So the CIA went in there and provoked, really, staged a coup. They put flyers everywhere against Mossadegh, getting the population angry. They paid people cash money to go out in the streets and break things, and they staged a coup, and Mossadegh ended up getting arrested. He was put in house arrest, actually. And, the rest of his life was slow and painful, really. But what the CIA did then was that they installed the Shah. So Shah just means king. So he's the king of Iran. But he was a public schoolboy, educated in Switzerland. Very Western in his ways, and very shy, and not at all royal. Kingly. He was like just a little nerd that didn't really know what to do. So he took control of the country, and he started pushing the country more Western, right? Which the Americans were very happy about. And this made him unpopular with large sections of society in Iran because they saw him as what he was, an American puppet. He was a puppet for the United States, and they were in de facto control of the country. And he kept this going for 26 years because he took it so far that in the end Iran was just like a big discotheque in the middle of a desert. It was really cheesy, really kind of plastic, and the Iranians said, this is not who we are. Your country's 300 years old, ours is at least 3,000 years old. What are you doing coming here telling us how to live? And we don't want to be plastic copies of the Yanks. Without no disrespect to the American people, but that's the way the Iranians felt about their national identity. We were the the Persian Empire, and now we're reduced to being plastic copies of a country that's only just open for business. So no, they weren't having that. And that caused a terrible reaction because the Ayatollah Khomeini, he was in exile in Iraq, and he came back in 1979 with a tidal wave of public support, and the Shah was the target. And the Shah had to run away. He had to escape. He spent the rest of his life just moving around the world, basically. And he was in exile, spent the rest of his life in exile and trying to figure out what the hell happened, because he really thought the people loved him. But he just pushed the country so far that he changed the identity of the country, and the people in it said, well, we didn't agree to this. And then they swung back because the Ayatollahs, they didn't want to just, tone it down. They put it in full reverse. They went, no. We're going, Wahhabi, Saudi Arabian style, back to the past. We're going to the days of Muhammad. And that's why Iran today remains highly religious country, and there's a strong fanatical religious element in Iran. And the distaste for the American people in Iran is very strong. And it's not the American people's fault. It's politicians and corporations and all that. But that is the origin of that, that hatred for the USA comes from that. Because like all empires, they went in pissing around in someone else's backyard and without any idea what they were doing. And it all went tits up, as it always does when you behave like that. Right? So that's one puppet dictator, the Shah of Iran, who was never in charge of anything. He just worked for the Americans, and we can see the consequences of that today. That's why we hear Iran in the news so much. So we go next door, Saddam Hussein. Don't tell me he was a puppet. Of course he was a puppet. Who was Saddam Hussein? Saddam Hussein, he was actually a minority. The whole ethnicity of that region is very difficult. There's Shiites and Sunnis and all that. And I think he's a Sunni. And he's in the minority there. And he was picked on at school for that reason. But he was a big lad, Saddam. And he used to just, knock people out. And he got a reputation for being a hard case. And he monetized it. He became a political hard case. So he had political aspirations, but he was a brutal bastard. He was like a political gangster. And he rose to power through violence. Guns, machetes, baseball bats, whatever you want, Just bare fists. He was a hard case, Saddam Hussein. And then he became the president. And the first thing he did was he had a meeting, like a parliament. It looks more like a theatre than a parliament because he's got a table at the front on the stage. And Saddam Hussein saying, right, this person, stand up. Treason. Get out. And the people waiting, obviously, outside the room for him. And then one by one, they all get their names called out and they get up and leave, and most of them are never seen again. Life in a prison in Iraq. No prisons are nice, but I wouldn't like to spend any time in a prison in Iraq. All due respect to Iraq. But I'm just not feeling it. And then, apart from that, what am I talking about? Yeah, the rest of them got assassinated. Or they got the death penalty. Right. So he tells all these people to stand up, and then they go out one by one, and they're never seen again. Some are sentenced to life in prison, and some are sentenced to death. They're killed. And so Saddam Hussein this time becomes the unchallenged leader of Iraq, and everyone's terrified of him. So at this point, this is the early 80s, and America has just lost control of Iran. So what they do is they go to Saddam Hussein and they make him an offer. So the Shah of Iran was a CIA agent, basically. And their agent failed in Iran. So they hired Saddam Hussein and they armed him. And they made him extremely rich and extremely powerful, especially in the Arab world. And shortly afterwards, Saddam Hussein decided to attack, guess who? That's right, Iran. So Iraq invaded Iran. And anyone who lived through the 80s remembers the Iran-Iraq war. And this was a CIA agent, Saddam Hussein, attacking Iran, which was previously governed by another CIA agent, the Shah of Iran. And what is also more disturbing even than that is if you look into the Iran-Contra scandal, you'll see that there is no doubt, and it is well recognised and testified to, that the Americans were selling arms to Iran in the same time period. So it's the oldest trick in the book. You sell weapons to both sides and say, right, go on, destroy each other. And they did. For 8 years, Iran and Iraq were at war. And then, so that war ends, and Saddam It looks very much, I think you actually see it on tape, it looks very much like he was told or encouraged by the American diplomat, who was a woman, I can't remember her name, but she encouraged him or suggested that it might not be a bad idea to invade Kuwait. So all these things are complicated because he owed money to Kuwait for other reasons, and he wanted them to say, "Oh, don't worry about it, Saddam," but they didn't. So he invaded Kuwait. So George Bush Senior, the father, says, "Right, we need this. We can't have this. We can't have countries invading other countries. The audacity of it. So we're gonna attack Iraq because we don't appreciate this invasion of Kuwait." So they said to Saudi Arabia, "Right, we're just going to basically occupy the northern part of your country, so that we can launch an attack on Iraqi forces and Iraq to liberate Kuwait." So that was problematic in itself, and we'll see why in a minute. So they went in, they smashed up Iraq, but it only took them a week or two max to smash it up. And the Iraqis quickly turned around. They seemed shocked. They turned around and just ran out of Kuwait, going, "Right, all right, I thought we had permission to attack Kuwait." Well, apparently not, because you're getting bombed and missiled. So, and there's a load of lies in that as well, where they used a young girl to lie and say she was a nurse working in a hospital, and the Iraqi soldiers came in and put the babies on the coal floors, and it was all a lie. She was the daughter of the ambassador, and the ambassador was sitting behind her. So they attack Iraq, they smash it. Then, not satisfied with that, the Clinton administration puts terrible sanctions on Iraq, starving the people. They won't let medicine in. And Madeleine Albright, who worked for Bill Clinton, was asked in an interview, "Look, do you think this is worth it? We've got 750,000 Iraqi children dead because of our sanctions. Do you think it's worth it?" And she just went like this, "Yes." There's no what do you mean 750,000 dead kids? Not surprised, not bothered at all. Just, yeah, it is worth it. And then, of course, after 9/11, they tried to say that Saddam Hussein was best mates with Osama bin Laden, which he totally wasn't. The opposite was true. But they all look alike, so we'll throw them in one basket. And that's the kind of racism that you're allowed to do, apparently. So they tried to say that they were mates when they weren't. And then they said, "Oh, well, okay, they're not mates then. But Saddam's got weapons of mass destruction, and he can blow up cities all over the world in less than 40 minutes. And that was total bullshit. And he got little weasels like Tony Blair from England and Aznar from Spain to join in with him in this bullshit parade. And then they used that to go in and attack Iraq again and smash it to pieces. Look at pictures of Mosul in particular. Baghdad and Mosul, absolute destruction, completely destroyed it. It's a failed state now. It's a failed state. It's not even a country. It's a hotbed of terrorism now because there's no structure. It's been destroyed by the American forces, not the American people, I repeat. So yeah, that's why Iraq is such a shit show now, because of the Americans and because of the same thing, tossing around in other people's countries. So you go to